I never thought I'd be relieved to hear the words, "FBI, open up!" shouted outside my own home. But when you've got private security goons blocking your driveway and a power-hungry HOA president breathing down your neck, sometimes federal intervention is exactly the miracle you need. My name is Wade Zimmer, and until 6 months ago, I was just another retired Marine trying to live a quiet life in Oak Ridge Estates. I'd saved for 15 years to afford this place, a modest 3-bedroom with a workshop where I could run my custom furniture business. What the realtor conveniently failed to mention was that our homeowners association was run by someone who made military dictators look reasonable. Linda Cromwell became HOA president 3 years before I moved in. Neighborhood legend had it that she ran unopposed because the previous board members mysteriously received job transfers to different states within weeks of crossing her. Most people dismiss these as coincidences or exaggerations. I should have paid more attention. My first encounter with Linda happened 2 days after I moved in. I was unloading lumber for a client's commission when her Mercedes SUV screeched to a halt in front of my driveway. "Excuse me," she said, stepping out in what appeared to be tennis whites even though it was November. "Commercial vehicles aren't permitted in driveways after 5 p.m. I glanced at my watch. "It's 3:15. And you have until 5 to complete whatever this is." She gestured dismissively at my truck. "Also, your mailbox is the wrong shade of taupe." "I haven't touched my mailbox," I replied. "Exactly. The previous owners painted it incorrectly, and you have 30 days to correct it. The approved color swatches are available at the HOA office for a nominal printing fee of $25. She handed me a violation notice that was already filled out. That was just the beginning. Over the next few months, I received notices about everything from the height of my grass, apparently measured with a ruler by one of Linda's compliance officers, to the positioning of my recycling bin, 3 inches too far from the curb. Each violation came with a fine, and each fine seemed to increase exponentially. I tried to fight it. I attended HOA meetings, which Linda ran like military tribunals. Residents were given exactly 2 minutes to speak, timed by Linda's assistant, a nervous man named Gordon who looked like he hadn't slept in years. Questions were tabled for future discussion. That never happened, and votes somehow always ended with Linda's preferred outcome, even when the show of hands suggested otherwise. The turning point came when I received a certified letter stating that my workshop violated the HOA covenant against home businesses. This was absurd. I'd specifically chosen this neighborhood because the covenant permitted home offices and workshops as long as they didn't cause excessive noise or traffic. "There's nothing in the rules against my workshop," I told Linda when I confronted her at the HOA office. "The rules were amended last month," she replied without looking up from her computer. "There was no vote on that. It was voted on during the executive session." "Executive sessions are only for legal matters and personnel issues." Linda finally looked up, her mouth tightening. "Mr. Zimmer, I'm very busy. The fine is $750 per day until you cease operations. If you feel this is unfair, you can submit a written appeal, which the board will review at our next quarterly meeting. That's 3 months from now. I'll owe over $67,000 by then." She smiled thinly. "Then I suggest you comply quickly." I left fuming, but I wasn't about to be bullied. I spent the night reading through every document related to our HOA, the original covenants, bylaws, state regulations on HOAs, meeting minutes for the past 5 years, everything I could get my hands on. What I found was disturbing. The financial reports showed the HOA collecting nearly 3 times the amount in fines compared to similar communities. Most concerning was where that money went. There were large payments to a security company called Premier Residential Protection, and a consulting firm named Cromwell Community Solutions. The connection wasn't subtle. I started asking around. My neighbor Eliza, a retired accountant, had been tracking the HOA finances for years but was afraid to speak up. "Linda's brother-in-law runs the security company," she whispered when she invited me in for coffee, constantly checking her windows as if expecting to be watched. "And Cromwell Community Solutions is registered to her husband." Isn't that a conflict of interest? I asked. Of course it is, but nobody dares question it. The last person who did, Marcus Johnson, suddenly had security patrols outside his house every hour. They followed his teenage daughter to school, cited his guests for parking violations. He sold his house at a loss just to escape. I thanked Eliza for the information, promising to keep her name out of it. That night, I emailed the County Housing Authority to inquire about HOA regulations regarding financial disclosures and conflicts of interest. 2 days later, I found my driveway blocked by a black SUV with Premier Residential Protection emblazoned on the side. 2 men in quasi-military uniforms stood by it. You need to move your vehicle, I said. I have deliveries to make. HOA orders, said the larger of the 2 men. His name tag read Briggs. This residence is under investigation for covenant violations. That's not how this works, I said. You can't block access to my home. Briggs crossed his arms. We have authority to enforce HOA regulations. You've been assessed multiple violations, and I've appealed them. Now move your vehicle before I call the police. Go ahead, he smirked. The sheriff's brother works for us. But while you wait for them not to show up, we'll be documenting additional violations. The second guard started taking photos of my house, focusing on trivial details like a barely visible cobweb under the eaves and a flower pot that apparently wasn't in approved style. I was contemplating whether ramming their vehicle with my truck would be worth the assault charges when a black sedan pulled up behind them. The windows were tinted, but even I could tell this wasn't a typical civilian car. The guards must have noticed too because they exchanged nervous glances. When the rear doors opened, 2 people stepped out, a tall man in a suit and a woman with a badge already visible on her belt. FBI, the woman announced, flashing her credentials. Special Agent Rebecca Torres. This is Special Agent Michael Donovan. Are you Wade Zimmer? I nodded, too stunned to speak. We'd like to ask you some questions about Linda Cromwell and the financial operations of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA. The security guards had gone pale. Briggs attempted to regain his composure. We're conducting official HOA business here. Agent Donovan turned slowly to face him. And what business requires blocking a resident's driveway? Covenant enforcement, Briggs muttered, suddenly much less confident. I see. May I see your security license? And the written HOA policy authorizing this action? The guards exchanged panicked looks. That's what I thought, Donovan said. Move your vehicle immediately, and I suggest you find a new line of work by tomorrow. They couldn't get out of there fast enough. As their SUV disappeared down the street, Agent Torres turned to me. Mr. Zimmer, your email to the Housing Authority was forwarded to us. It fits a pattern we've been investigating. May we come inside? Over coffee in my kitchen, the agents explained that Linda Cromwell wasn't just running a typical HOA scam. She was under investigation for money laundering, tax evasion, and wire fraud. Apparently, Cromwell Community Solutions was moving money through several HOAs in 3 counties, using inflated fines and fraudulent service contracts to clean cash from other, less legitimate business interests. We've been building a case for 14 months, Agent Torres explained. Your detailed documentation of the violations and financial discrepancies was exactly what we needed to connect some dots. So what happens now? I asked. We're executing search warrants on the HOA office and Cromwell's home today. We'll need your statement, and you might be called to testify later. Will I face retaliation from her or the security company? Agent Donovan shook his head. Not likely. We're moving on all targets simultaneously. But if anyone approaches you, call us immediately. They left me their cards and headed out for the raids. I sat in my kitchen for a long time, processing what had just happened. Part of me wanted to drive by Linda's house to see the FBI hauling out boxes, but I resisted the urge. I didn't have to wait long for news. By that evening, my phone was blowing up with texts from neighbors. Video of Linda Cromwell being escorted from the HOA office in handcuffs was already circulating in the neighborhood group chat. Preliminary reports suggested they'd found over $2 million in cash in a hidden safe behind her desk, along with multiple sets of accounting books. The following weeks were chaotic. An emergency meeting was called, and the remaining board members, those not implicated in Linda's schemes, voted to suspend all recently imposed fines pending review. The security company's contract was terminated, and an outside accounting firm was brought in to audit the HOA finances. I was surprised when several neighbors nominated me for the now vacant president position. "You stood up to her when nobody else would," explained Eliza at the meeting. "And you know the bylaws better than anyone now." I was reluctant. Running an HOA had never been on my bucket list, but agreed to serve as interim president until proper elections could be held. My first official acts were to return the covenants to their original form, eliminate unnecessary fines, and commission a full forensic audit. What that audit revealed was staggering. Under Linda's leadership, nearly $5.7 million had been diverted through fraudulent contracts and inflated services. Money that should have gone to road repairs, the community pool, and landscaping had instead funded the Cromwell's vacation homes and luxury cars. The FBI investigation expanded as they followed the money trail. It turned out Linda's husband Thomas was connected to real estate developers who were using the HOA to force homeowners out of properties they wanted to acquire. The security guards had been intimidating elderly residents, and the excessive fines were designed to put financial pressure on specific homeowners whose properties were targeted for redevelopment. 3 months after the arrests, I was sitting on my front porch when a moving truck pulled up to Linda's house. Her husband had been arrested 2 weeks after she was, and their property had been seized as proceeds of criminal activity. A young couple emerged from a sedan parked behind the truck. "Hi there!" the woman called out, waving as she walked toward my yard. "I'm Sarah, and this is my husband Diego. We just bought the Cromwell house." I introduced myself and offered to help them unload. "You're the guy, aren't you?" Diego asked as we carried a sofa inside. "The one who brought down the HOA Tyrant?" "I just asked some questions," I said. "The FBI did the rest." "Well, the neighbors have been telling us stories all morning," Sarah said. "Apparently she had cameras installed in the street lights to monitor who was putting their trash out too early." I laughed. "That's actually true. The board found 14 unauthorized surveillance cameras when we did an inventory." "Unbelievable." Diego shook his head. "We almost didn't buy in this neighborhood because we heard horror stories about the HOA, but our agent assured us things had changed." "They have," I promised. "We've rewritten the bylaws to focus on maintaining property values without micromanaging people's lives. The quarterly fees are down 30% now that we're not paying for Linda's shell companies." "And you're the president now?" Sarah asked. "Just until next month's election. I'm not running for a full term. I've got cabinets to build." They insisted on having me over for dinner once they were settled, and I accepted. It felt good to know that my act of resistance had helped transform our community from one ruled by fear to one where neighbors could actually become friends. The final chapter of the saga came 6 months later. Linda Cromwell's trial made local headlines as prosecutors outlined a scheme that had victimized hundreds of homeowners across multiple communities. She was sentenced to 15 years for fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Her husband and brother-in-law received slightly shorter sentences for their roles. The day after the sentencing, I received a letter from the FBI thanking me for my assistance in breaking the case. Enclosed was a notice that I was eligible for a whistleblower reward from the recovered assets. The amount, $127,000, was more than enough to expand my workshop and hire an assistant. I still live in Oak Ridge Estates. Our new HOA board meets quarterly, focuses on community improvements rather than punitive actions, and publishes all financial records online. We've added a dog park, renovated the playground, and started a neighborhood farmers market in the community center parking lot on weekends. Sometimes I look back at that day when Linda's security goons blocked my driveway, thinking they were untouchable. Their faces when the FBI agents stepped out of that sedan were worth every violation notice I ever received. I've learned that standing up to bullies isn't just personally satisfying, it can transform an entire community. And every time I drive past the community center and see families enjoying the new facilities funded by properly managed HOA dues, I remind myself that one person asking the right questions can make all the difference. The best part? Our mailboxes can now be any shade we want. Mine is fire engine red. I think of it as my little daily victory flag, flying proudly in what is now genuinely a neighborhood worth coming home to.